Welcome to Security Watch. This is Zain. Today, the topic of our show is current and future role of air power in Indo-Pak escalation dynamics. Today, the special guest of Security Watch is Air Chief Marshal Kaleem Saadat. He was the former Air Chief of Pakistan, and he's currently the president of Center for Aerospace and Security Studies. Our second guest, as always, is Athar Javed. He is an academic, a senior analyst, and also DG Pakistan House. Welcome to our show, Mr. Saadat. This is Zain Khan. It is a pleasure having you on Security Watch.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome to our show, Athar Javed. It is a pleasure having you on Security Watch, as always.
Thank you very much, Zain. Bahut shukriya aapka.
Mr. Saadat, let's get to the first question. The asymmetric warfare has changed the way militaries are being used to defeat terrorist organization and terrorists, or even limited territorial incursions. How does modernization of Pakistan Air Force benefit the future military strategy? Yes, sir.
There are many facets to this. First of all, there is intelligence and surveillance. That could be done by drones and unmanned aerial vehicles or even manned aeroplanes to determine where a terrorist or a group or an individual could be. Once that is done, then it becomes a problem of targeting the same. For that, you require precision guided munition, and that obviously all modern air forces have those. The accuracy is increasing all the time. And that is why you have seen that whatever operations were conducted in Iraq by the United States Air Force or in Afghanistan, they were possible because of the surveillance capability, intelligence capability of airborne platforms, as well as the precision strike capability of manned and unmanned platforms.
Mr. Athar Javed, this is a very important question. In Indo-Pak escalation dynamics, air power has always played an integral role. Either we look at 65, 71, Kargil, or even post-Pulwama skirmish, as many call it, the limited war. Is this trend likely to continue in the future? And if so, why? How do you explain it?
Well, thank you very much, Zain. I think let me add first what Sir said actually prior to this question, if you allow me. Well, regarding the reconnaissance and everything, it also very interestingly in Pakistani case in the recent times, Air Force has played a remarkable role actually in campaign against terrorists in our own in Fatah area and other places. It is because that sheer integrated system of also intelligence sharing from the ground, and also as Mr. Saadat he indicated and mentioned that it is because of the precision weapons which you use. Once the target is dilated or explode and confirmed from the ground and in the air, then it is done in that way. In response to what you asked me, basically, I would say that I cannot say that it's a trend, basically. What I would like to say is that Pakistan has shown great restraint, even on February 20, last year, February, because there were multiple targets, but Pakistan didn't attack them. It just basically demonstrates the responsibility of Pakistan. But in the case that India continue to violate our airspace and international regulations of Pakistan's integrity, territorial integrity, definitely India will get the response which it deserves.
Mr. Saadat, would you like to add something to what Mr. Javed just said?
Yes, what I want to add is that there were two aspects to it. One was the precision. The other one is that there is also the consideration of collateral damage, because the terrorists, individual or groups, they hide in populated areas, and you can't randomly attack them. A general purpose bomb will not be able to take them out or even neutralize them. So, and also it will cause a lot of collateral damage. So to avoid that, you require precision guidance and precision intelligence. When you know that a terrorist in a certain place, room, or whatever, once you have that intelligence, you have the weapons to neutralize them and you can take them out. So collateral damage is a major consideration in anti-terrorist operations.
Mr. Saadat, I want to ask you this very important question. Pakistan Air Force's role in the counterinsurgency campaign in Fatah isn't widely known. How did PAF adapt its assets to such a novel role and ensured that operational objectives were met while avoiding collateral damage or blue-on-blue casualties?
Basically, you see, the need for involvement of the Air Force arose when the Army faced difficulties in neutralizing or taking on these terrorists, because there were these mountains, there were these hilltops on which 2 or 3 terrorists would go and man positions. Now, our army was in lower positions, so they were vulnerable and they could not tackle them. So what you required was that an aerial attack was the most suitable for this, and given the precision that was available, it was easier to take out 1, 2, 3, 4 isolated terrorists on a hilltop quite easily. While for the army, if they had to climb those mountains or hills, etc., to neutralize these, they would have suffered casualties. So it was both economical as well as efficient. And obviously, there was no collateral damage involved because these were known terrorists isolated in a certain spot.
Mr. Saadat, I want to ask you another very important question. As we all know, Operation Swift Retort highlighted the critical importance of force multipliers like AWACS and EW platforms. Do you foresee the role of such supporting platforms acquiring greater importance in future air battles in the subcontinent?
They have always been important, but it's just that either because of financial constraints or because of technology release constraints, we could not get them earlier. But as a group captain, I first started the process of acquiring the AREI, the Airborne Early Warning Platform, because at that time I thought that it was very important. And I'm talking about 1992, 1993, and ultimately we were able to sign the contract in 2006. So it took us 14 years, to get to that stage, because either the money was not available or the Swedes were not willing to release, or there were other constraints. But the Air Force was very clear right from the very beginning that these force multipliers were required. And February 27th proved it, that how useful they were and how decisive they were in the outcome of the operations that took place on that day. And it was also true about the electronic warfare, because that wasn't the Indian Air Force's vulnerability. They could not hear what we were saying, but we could hear whatever they were saying. So that was a big edge that we enjoyed. And so it proved to be a force multiplier.
Mr. Javed, would you like to add something?
Yes, I think it is regarding what one of the points which I also managed to observe, because I was in the Scandinavian countries at that time at the University of Copenhagen. But we were observing, of course, these are the confidential deals. We do not know. But the United States sanctions and all that did affect Swedes' delay, basically. I mean, the matter of funds were, as may agree, was resolved. But the issue was that the Swedes faced a lot of pressure from the United States, India, because India is also one of the major buyers from Sweden and United States now. So I think this factor also plays always in regarding Pakistan's desire to upgrade or acquire most modern technology, whether it is for the Air Force, Navy, or the Army. I know that I would definitely add one thing, that Air Force resources have been, under resources for a very long time, and that factor also contributes. So, of course, there is a need to enhance or generate funds for the for indigenous innovations, or we call them, the new technology for the Air Force, because I think this would make a huge difference if the funds are more funds are allocated to Pakistan Air Force.
Would you like to wrap this up, Mr. Saadat, so we can get to our next point?
I will also illustrate this point further, that before 2001, before the American aid was resumed, or their release of logistic support was resumed, Pakistan before that was denied technology from everywhere. We were interested in buying the Gripen fighter also from Sweden, but they said we cannot give you an offensive aeroplane because our parliament would not allow this. But because ARI, airborne early warning platform, was a defensive weapon, so they will agree to the sale of that platform, but they will not agree to an offensive platform. So these are constraints that are always at play, and ultimately you have to find a niche or a window in which you can acquire and put these things together. So it's a challenging task, but I guess one keeps doing it till one succeeds.
Mr. Javed, I want to ask you this question because I think it's your subject as well. With the rapid development of disruptive military technologies such as directed energy weapons, hypersonic glide vehicles, artificial intelligence, and obviously cyber warfare, how important is it for the PAF, Pakistan Air Force, to identify the most critical game changers and accordingly invest in its limited fiscal resources? How important will the role of a private sector be in such an endeavor, and how can we promote private sector R&D in aerospace domain?
I think let me pick up from where the Air Chief actually left. The point where you face continuous international restrictions, and in a contentious way in which they would also prevent acquiring you, not from the US or other countries, but any other country. And if they provide you some capability, like we had F-16, mostly it's very impaired in terms of its comprehensive, offensive advantages. This is one point. Second, in relation to artificial intelligence, we must understand that Pakistan is not close to, very close to, I would say, to acquire that AI capacity. There are so many drawbacks in this new field that it's almost now 50 to 55% accuracy it is managed through machine learning, advanced learning, we call it DL. And the problem is that if you involve, unlike other countries, because the Western countries had their consortiums supported by the respective governments, if it's Boeing or other private sectors involved, still there is a element of the government and the Pentagon there. I mean, maybe in terms of their front companies. So I would say in relation to Pakistan, we have a very serious problem. We cannot basically go, except China at the moment, we cannot go to those countries and asking them to lend hand because of the security concerns. Also, I would say because of the future in 20 years time, we do not know how the cyber security would emerge, because the cyber security, what we understand in Pakistan, is mostly very academic, intellectual, or maybe at a level where we may try to acquire the expertise in it. But to be honest, if I look around in Western Europe, especially, the most modern hackers, they give depositions to their respective intelligence agencies that they can, Tesla, they can do in 1 minute, or under 1 minute, or they can disrupt any missile system, they can put the system in disarray. So there are two things I would say as a student of military history or strategy, that it needs to be indigenous, one, it has to be with a country which, like China, for example, in this case, or any other country for that matter, that where you understand that these mechanisms developed must be protected from the effect of cybersecurity breaches, because the most advanced countries like Israel, like US, they really have used this to demonstrate that they have the ability to disrupt weapon system. They have the ability. They have shown in Iraq few hackers also, and one of the missile, I think the U.S. missile. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly, but we read in the news that it also went in disarray. So there are concerns of the artificial intelligence that it is not mastered yet through machine learning. It needs more years, maybe a decade or so. But I would not recommend I would not recommend that Pakistan Air Force should, or Pakistan's top technology, although there is a requirement, but they should do something in-house within the departments which can validate that it is not, it will not be at risk. I mean, this is really important point from my side.
Mr. Saadat, would you like to add something to what Mr. Javed just said?
Sure. The issue is rightly pointed out that we have a very low base of artificial intelligence. We are just starting in this field. India is slightly ahead. The Western countries obviously are far ahead because they have used a lot of artificial intelligence in commercial use. This Amazon and Microsoft and all the prompts that you get on when you're typing is all artificial intelligence. So they are well ahead. And Pakistan is just starting. But the point that is to be recognized is that we have to do it indigenously, because others will not help us. Or if they do, they will sabotage it, because all they need to do is to place a chip over there to undermine it. So we have, whatever we do, we have to do it within our own country. And Air Force has established an institute of artificial intelligence, and it will soon start working. The other thing that needs to be understood about is that artificial intelligence has had 2 winters already, and we are heading towards the 3rd winter. And the reason is that the renewed enthusiasm for artificial intelligence was because of 2 things. One was the power of the computer, its capacity, and second was the development of the algorithms. But there was a third element required, where artificial intelligence could reach superintelligence. That superintelligence means the intelligence of a human beyond that. But they have not been able to do it for the reason that the neuroscientists cannot explain why does the brain do certain things that it does. They can't decode the logic, they can't decode why it happens and how it happens. So if you don't know that part of the brain that is computing, how can artificial intelligence through machine learning acquire that? So that is why, although they say that it's not an artificial intelligence winter, but they point towards an artificial intelligence autumn coming up.
Let me use those 5 seconds which you were giving to Sir. The 5 seconds for me is that, Sir, you have exactly referred to the point which I mentioned in the beginning, that it is about that when on the ground, when you are implementing this machine learning design to the leadership or those who are using tactical or operational methods to neutralize the enemy, your brain would tell you quite the opposite. The circumstances can be, 1,000 times divergent than the machine was programmed through algorithms, because the reason on the ground could be changed. The enemy can change the tactics. So that is one of the reasons what I was not recommending that we should acquire anything from outside.
No, and there's another issue involved, and that is that human brain is versatile. It can do multitasking. It can look at various problems simultaneously. The machine, artificial intelligence cannot do it. It can do just one activity. If it is surveillance, it can do only surveillance. If it is, producing something routine, time after time after time, it will do something. If it is, let's say, a drone delivery of something that you buy, groceries, etc., that artificial intelligence will only do that. So there is this severe limitation that there is no magic bullet of artificial intelligence which can do like the human brain, and that is why it is so widespread, but it is so limited in its span of activities that it can control.
Mr. Saadat, we see the U.S. Air Force developing unmanned combat aerial platforms. Do you foresee a hybrid unmanned and manned force structure for the Pakistan Air Force in the near future? How will future pilot training evolve to enable our pilots to adapt such a future?
The training would be simplified in the sense that when we were started to fly, there were 15 steps required to start an engine of the aeroplane, because everything had to be done manually by the pilot, and he also had to remember the order in which those steps were to be taken. What has artificial intelligence done? That it has incorporated all those actions into a computer, and you press one button and the process starts, and at the right moment the fuel is sent to the engine, at the right moment the ignition starts, at the right moment the current is supplied, etc., etc. So it will simplify some tasks of the pilot. The routine tasks, etc., can be taken care of the artificial. Similarly, detection of this thing and whether you are when to fire the weapon, that will be obviously eased. But to arrive at that level where all this thing can happen, at the press of a button, requires a great deal of scientific advancement, a great deal of scientific administration, and a great deal of scientific proving, that is required to reach that level. That is a complicated affair, and what we have to understand is that, first of all, to be able to do all this, we have to strengthen our scientific education, because on that scientific education, a technology built structure can be built. And the sooner we lay greater emphasis on science and its education in our higher education institutions, the quicker we'll be able to march towards that destination.
Mr. Saadat, when we talk of air power in the subcontinent, we basically neglect the space domain. If you agree or disagree with what I just said, how can Pakistan carve out its own niche in outer space to ensure we don't lag behind in this critical domain?
I've been asked this question many times. In a lot of conferences, this question is asked. And my reply always is that our nuclear program and our space program nearly started at the same time. But we gave priority to the nuclear program because it was directly involved with our security. At that time, we didn't consider space to be directly threatening our security or the enemy space capability threatening our security. So we did not pay as much attention. The other issue was of constraints of finances. So if you don't provide money to Suparco, etc., it wasn't given enough resources at that time, so it cannot implement its plans that it had envisioned. So there wasn't even legislation done for space. Our constitution does not have a mention of space in it, and all funding, etc., has to be followed by is to follow the legislation. So if you don't legislate for a space program or space vision, obviously the rest of the things will not follow. Then after that, there has to be a very strong activism in favor of space, which again was lacking. There was activism in favor of the nuclear program. The armed forces were pursuing it, the scientists were pursuing it, the chief executives, president, prime ministers, etc., they were very conscious of this and they gave it the highest priority. And that is why it succeeded. The space program or space education, etc., was not given the same priority and the same resources, so it lagged behind. So the conclusion is that we have to pay greater emphasis to space, provide them the resources, both human and financial for it to move forward. The other thing that needs to be understood is that that also there is a question of approach, and that is that right now what I find is that Suparco is trying to see as to what capabilities it has and what can it additionally it can do with those capabilities, which I think is the wrong approach. We should first fix our vision and also bias it towards commercial exploitation of space so that we can generate financial resources, and that will multiply its research and development capability, R&D capability, and from there we could help develop the security related space program or militarized space programs also. So there is a need to change the approach that we adopt towards the progress of the space program.
Mr. Athar Javed, as we see again that things are again escalating between Pakistan and India, we've seen last year's skirmishes between Pakistan and India. Now India has fighter jets, Rafales. How big of a threat or a challenge do they pose to Pakistan and the Pakistan's Air Force?
Of course, obviously, factually, it is. I would not say it's a threat, but of course, it would be challenging for Pakistan. But I'm not sure if it is still operational. It will take a couple of years to be operational. If Mr. Saadat can correct me if I'm wrong. Also, we normally talk about this is more to the our traditions. We say that it's a man behind the gun, not the gun itself, because Pakistan Air Force history is filled with tremendous and remarkable, services, despite of the having lesser advanced, I would say, less advanced airplanes in comparison to India. We can give only. I can only give example of India because most of things we had with them. But at the same time, I would say the Pakistan, we have a clear restraints. We would like to have all kind of fighter jets if we have A, the resources, B, the will of those countries to give us. So I'm not sure really that they can put that much stress on us, but we do have other programs which I definitely would like Mr. Saadat to comment on to, like our own program of JF-17 Thunder, and maybe a potential future projects with China. I don't want to say anything about the future projects because it would be then, from my side, I think it is not fair to that I should say it.
Mr. Saadat, would you like to add something to what Mr. Javed just said?
Okay, now this Rafale issue, as you know that India has always been the instigator of the arms race in the region. Right from 1947, India always attempted to gain technological and other superiority over Pakistan, and Pakistan was always playing catch up. For good 10-15 years, in fact more 20 years, Pakistan did not have a beyond visual range air-to-air missile. But that did not mean that Pakistan Air Force gave up. It developed the tactics, etc., and it was ready to fight with whatever was thrown in its way. So Rafale also poses a similar challenge. But again, my contention is that there is no magic bullet which will solve all of your security problems. That when India gets the Rafale, all of its issues will not be taken care of. They have the problem of diversity of equipment. The Air Force has to operate as a whole in an integrated fashion. So they have Russian aeroplanes, they have American aeroplanes, they have French aeroplanes, they have Israeli material. So and everybody, because of the reasons of security, develop their own algorithms. Now to integrate them, nobody gives out his algorithms to the other company because they are patented, and in contracts it is written that you will not share these algorithms, etc., with the other. So while India will gather all these capabilities, their sum total will be less than their individual sum. But that is not to say that Pakistan Air Force or Pakistani military will not attempt to again narrow the gap by acquiring additional capability either indigenously or through third parties, China, etc., and whoever we can get that. I mean, it's not a new challenge. We have been like this forever, and inshallah we will continue to do that again.
I mean, we will continue to catch up with them, inshallah,
Yes,
and we will
yes,
continue to counter them and defeat them.
yes.
Mr. Saadat, I want to get to the last question, and this is a hypothetical question, but obviously it's very important. As we see things escalating in Ladakh, as we see things escalating between Pakistan and India again, we've seen last year's skirmishes between Pakistan and India. Let's think of a hypothetical situation, and I want to put a hypothetical question in front of you. If India decides to intrude Pakistan's airspace again, how strongly would Pakistan's Air Force, how strongly would they reply to that? And obviously you're the former chief, you're also the president of CAS. The juniors want to listen to you. It's going to be whatever you say is very important. So I want your comments on this. Give us your reply. Yes, sir.
You see, the technical difficulties or incapability that they had, or the gaps that they had, they have not been filled up yet. So Indian Air Force is not too far different, or in fact very little different from what it was a year and a half ago. So we are quite capable of tackling them effectively. The only danger is that because 26th October was also for political reasons, it was not for military reasons. Now that they are facing this embarrassment vis-a-vis China, to divert attention from that, they would want to shift the attention of the public as well as the media towards Pakistan. So they may do some mischief, but Pakistan will respond, and respond effectively. And the other thing is that by doing this mischief, India's Chinese problem is not going to go away. I mean, the Chinese are going to stay in Ladakh. They may do whatever you want. They can do a surgical strike, 1, 2, or whatever number they may choose. But the Chinese problem is not going to go away. So their larger dilemma will still not be resolved. They are trying to do the same thing that they did in February, that, they are fudging the figures. They said 350 people were killed in Balakot, and now they are saying 43 Chinese were killed over there. Who knows how many have been killed? But again, to boost the morale of the public and the media, they will give out figures, but ultimately you will realize that the truth will come out and they will again face embarrassment. So I am confident that we would have an answer. It is best for India not to indulge in mischief, because I tweeted this morning that a week is a long time in politics. Last week or till last week, it was being stated that Pakistan has differences with all or most of its neighbors. A week later, we find that India has territorial disputes with 3 major neighbors. See how things change. And it is all of India's own creation. Nobody has forced these things on India, but it's being adventurous, being over ambitious, thinking of themselves as this emerging superpower. They indulge into this hubris, and because of which they are facing these difficulties.
Mr. Javed, would you like to add something?
One of the beautiful things you have said, sir, is I think I would definitely concur to it and give my opinion, is that India's unstructured ambitions and this desire to become superpower has caused this entire issue, not for only the Indian government. Actually, it has caused for that India, which was known, Gandhi's India, non-violent. this militarized ideology of RSS, Hindutva, basically has sort of is speeding up the internal fragmentation of India. And that is one of the reasons that they manufacture this false, every single day on the media, false numbers, as you said. They mentioned that they have killed this so and so, and international media witnessed there was none. And same goes for with China. What I noticed from their Indian media is that they're not saying go and attack Chinese, like they say, go inside Pakistan, do this. They're saying it should be resolved diplomatically, because they understand that they are equal power. If they think that they were giving a deceptive idea to US that we will do your dirty laundry from our side against Chinese, this must have actually unraveled the entire this fictitious infatuation with the playing with the fire. I would say infatuation, the strategic infatuation of India. That is what I think is important, that exactly 3 countries are involved, not only territorial, but there has been clashes with Nepalese police as well, with the Indian Border Security Force. That is also the second reason which substantiate your argument that this would in near future would result in more devastation for India. But we definitely hope that India should not carry out any misadventure, because otherwise definitely will get the answer which they will remember for years to come.
Thank you so much, Air Chief Marshal Kaleem Saadat, for being on Security Watch. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you so much, Athar Javed Saab, for being on Security Watch. It was a pleasure having you, as always.
Thank you very much, Zain.
This was Kaleem Saadat, Pakistan's former air chief and also the president of Islamabad-based think tank CAS. Our second guest joining us, Athar Javed. Mr. Javed is DG Pakistan House and also a senior analyst. We were discussing current and future role of air power in Indo-Pak escalation dynamics. Until the next episode of Security Watch, this is Zain Khan. Take care and goodbye.